All right. All right, this is the most unique of all interviews because, by the way, if I'm standing over here at this camera, I want you to go there with me, and if I'm here, I want you to look at me. But you're looking up at Paul and not at the camera. Okay. You grew up in the geographical area that is Michiana, South Bend Metro. Dad was involved in athletics. But you didn't grow up a Penn kid.
No.
But you grew up in this area, so you've seen Penn literally go from barn to castle. So talk about Penn High School growing up as the son of an athletic director in the South Bend School Corporation. What was the viewpoint that what Penn was?
Well, my dad was the athletic director at LaSalle High School, old LaSalle High School in South Bend from its inception in 1965 to 1987. So I was going to games with him when I was a young boy. And I really, it didn't really dawn on me. It was just LaSalle, let's see how they do. I do remember the first time that Penn came across my way. It's still a memorable game. To this day. It was one of the few times that Mike Zucchini had a team. It was mid-70s. I don't remember exactly the year, 74 or 75. They're playing at Schoolfield. Penn was ranked 5th. LaSalle was ranked 8th. It was back when Schoolfield had both press boxes. Both sides were cement bleachers. We were on the north side. And it was a great game. Came down to the final, maybe 2 minutes of the game. The score was tied. Penn was kicking a field goal that was blocked. LaSalle picked it up, looked like they were going to run it in, but they had blockers in front, not behind, so they got caught. Went to overtime. LaSalle scored, went up 7. Penn scored, went for 2, got stopped. Penalty on LaSalle, run at half the distance. Quarterback faked, took it in. Penn won. Great game. That's how I was first remembered. Penn High School was in the mid-70s on that particular day. And what I didn't realize was just what Penn was going to do from there on out. It was kind of a stepping stone that if they could beat Penn. But LaSalle during the 70s, for whatever reason, would give Penn a little bit of trouble during those games, maybe up to the very early 80s. And then Penn pretty much dominated. But didn't hear much about Penn, really, and through the 70s as a boy growing up. Just remember that game specifically. And then when I got to Washington as a student, and I was in the band, you wanted to beat them. I mean, first, in the early part, I was at Washington from 75 to 79. The early part was beating Mishawaka. But then Penn started to come in right about my junior year. And boy, Coach Giesman had some teams, and they really laid it on us pretty good. So they were the bad, you're going up in South Bend, and Penn they were the bully. You wanted to beat them. It was already starting in the late 70s, and we could see it. And that's just how it was, and the bully kept winning.
All right, so then you go to a different role as a scribe for the South Bend Tribune. You covered a ton of games and had a chance to engage with Coach Chris Giesman as a journalist. And then you had a chance to see teams grow and get to know some of the people involved. So I want you to take me back to being a journalist for the South Bend Tribune and what it was like covering him as a newspaper guy.
Well, it was always a pleasure to go to Penn. They always put on a good show for the media. They also did it was good to cover the team. Coach Giesman was always very respectful to the other teams, even if all of us in the media knew that they were going to win that night. He always tried to be very respectful and to the opponent as well. Their teams were dynamite running teams. Back in those days when I was covering, they ran the ball. Jeremy Lowry, I'm just thinking of some names right off the top of my head. He was pretty much one-dimensional, Coach Giesman, at that time. And but they won a lot of games, and I remember when they finally got over the hump and won that first state tournament. But I was covering a lot of high school part-time type things, and I didn't see them all the time, every week, sometimes once a year, but you knew who they were, and you talked to enough guys and you knew what they were doing, and they were beating teams that maybe they shouldn't have. Elkhart Central used to have a nice little rivalry with them, They had some speed, Elkhart Central, great track teams, wide receivers, and yet Penn would always find a way to beat them by a couple of touchdowns. So covering them, it was pretty much, you knew what you were going to get when you got to see them. They were a pretty talented team.
And then your career kind of takes a different turn. You become part of the regional radio sports team, and then you become the voice of Penn high school football and broadcasting, working with Coach Giesman on a week in and week out basis. And then, it was awesome. You and I had a chance to do the state championship games together. Take me back to going up there in the booth and being the voice of the Kingsmen on the radio.
Yeah, it was really a treat at that time. I really thought that, to do play-by-play. I mean, I've listened to so many great announcers in the past to be an opportunity to be, just to do what they did, and then to cover this team that was so good. You knew you had a chance to go deep in the state every year in the state tournament. I was fortunate enough to cover a couple of state runs, state champions from those years. And the thing that really got me is that you got familiar with the team, the players, seeing them every week. You almost knew what was coming when somebody checked in. You knew they were going to go to him. A Jocelyn Goodman, who plays on defense, checks in on offense. They're going to him, and no one could stop it. Those are the kind of things you picked up sitting up in the press box. You got to have a camaraderie with people. You met new people, and it was a new challenge, and very, very much a rewarding one at the time.
For 25 years, you've been a part of the Indiana Football Digest, so you've wrote about the team. You've had a chance to be a part of the landscape of high school football on the grand scale. So when you look at Penn from a statewide, from the microcosm of where we're at geographically, and you look at Penn in the large scale of it, how do you think Penn is perceived statewide?
I would assume that they are perceived as a very great team, great program. You're going to somebody almost annually you're going to see them down in the semi-state trying to get in. I think it's a stunner to anybody these days if they get beat before that, just because of the type of teams that Corey and Chris put out. Chris kind of obviously paved the way, and then Corey's kind of picked it up. And it's their execution, it's their commitment, it's they just have found a way. The numbers that they have in their program. It's a large school, but I think it's respect. I think that anybody these days you talk what Corey has done, a very approachable coach. I can't see anything but respect from the other teams. I think that they will welcome the challenge to see them. They know that they're getting down. They're going to get a heck of a game from them. Carmel found that out last 2 years. They lost to them 2 years ago and had to work hard to beat them a year ago just to get to the state title game. So I can't see it would be anything less than respect statewide, especially what Corey's done on an annual basis and prior to that.
If you look at the big picture of what Coach Giesman and Dr. Spiker started, and then what Dr. Thacker has done since then, they've created this mantra, this thing that's called the Penn Way. There's a good portion of the front of this book we're going to talk about the Penn Way, whether it be a mentality or whether it be a mindset. And it comes from the little things like Dr. Thacker coming up into the press box, stopping and saying hi to everybody, just makes everybody feel nice, warm, and welcome, and kind of gives you the fuzzies as you feel like they want you to be a part of the family. So from your new position as the public address announcer at so many Penn games, how do you perceive the Penn Way and what does it mean to you?
The Penn Way to me really means team commitment and family. I think it's how they, well, first of all, it's how, let's just talk about myself personally for just a second. When I became the announcer out there, it doesn't matter what sport I'm in, I've been treated terrifically. I mean, they just, I can't begin to tell you how warm I feel every time I go out there with the way that the athletic directors, everyone from the superintendent right on down, make me feel. That's a tremendous feeling going into the game that night. And then when you talk about the Penn Way itself with the football team commitment, I mean, we've seen this now, high school student athletes, so much more going on today in their lives. They have to be fully committed as a team to each season, workouts, individual, it's a year-long thing. And we all know that there's going to be, with a big team, there's always going to be one or two. You hope it doesn't get more than that when it slipped through the cracks. I think that more often than not, we don't see that in the Penn program. Corey does a great job of keeping the kids on task and what they have to do. I've seen a lot of great kids come out of Penn and graduate and go on to great college careers, even the military. It's been really a pleasure to see that. But I think the team commitment, you ask these kids about, you'll hear media members, hey, who's really improved? Who's a top guy? They'll never name a name. It's always about the whole offensive line, the entire skill set. They really believe in team concept, and I think it's a commitment, and that to me is what the Penn way is.
Your favorite Penn moment as a writer, sportscaster, public address? Do you have one in your 3 chairs?
Oh, as a sportscaster, there's no question that my favorite was being able to announce the state championship game, broadcast the state championship, my very first one, 1995. To be down at then the Hoosier Dome, it was great to see, and Penn won it. I mean, that's a pinnacle of every broadcaster to do his top game. Also, as a PA announcer, I would have to say that probably my very first semi-state game, because I was really pumped up. It's a semi-state, it's big, it was against Carmel, and you know it's one step away. And the really neat thing about that day, proudest moment as an announcer, was when the Carmel athletic director sent then athletic director Ben Karaziak a comment saying, thanking Ben for everything that Ben had did to try to make the team, his, Carmel, in the cooperation of being up there, and also mentioned that it's the best PA announcer he'd ever heard. And to me, that was a defining moment for me. A semi-state game, you knew this guy from Carmel had seen a lot of state finals, because that's what Carmel does. And for him to say that at that kind of event, I was pretty pumped. So those 2 things. As a writer, I never saw them in a situation where it was anything more than a sectional game. Certainly, none of them really stick out to me. I have a little trouble remembering, honestly, that far back that I covered any. I think when I covered them, it was early games against LaSalle or Washington. They pretty much dominated those. So none really stick out at that moment. But certainly the broadcast of the state championship, and then doing that semi-state with Carmel, really being pumped about it, and then getting that kind of comment from Jimmy and Skeet was pretty impressive.
Good job, buddy.